But relevant to pioneers, we have a pioneer section here with a little welcome message, status update about coming in January, and just this commitment to, in the new year, building in public more. Right. So even Andamio itself has roots in different pioneers programs. That's kind of fun. And yeah, we just started thinking about things we could build, but some of those even initial conversations became sketches of Andamio. And so that came out of a time where Cardano smart contracts were brand new, tooling was limited, and we were all just figuring out what we could do. And I think we hit a sweet spot at that time of just, balancing between these technical conversations and these kind of bigger picture conversations. And, I would love for 2026 to be a year like that, but where we're really focusing on this new thing called Andamio that now exists in the world. So kicking that off today, the invitation is for people to start collaborating, right? We're going to start building in public, give people a chance to show up, and we're going to build this structure as we go, see what it evolves into. So to frame all the work, we have the documentation, and one of the outcomes of everything we're doing here is to keep improving these docs. But we have a dedicated space for Andamio Pioneers, a little welcome message, and a getting started guide. At the top of the guide are the tools we're going to use. We have the Discord server for regular communication, GitHub, where we have a team that anybody's welcome to join. I think we have everybody on this call covered. Yeah, but if other people show up, I'll invite them to share their GitHub handle. We can add them to a team, and the only repo so far on that team is the new T3 app template. And we'll use Google Meet for these recordings. Thanks, Roberto, for starting the archive. So here's the notes, just the Gemini transcription of the meeting earlier today. And we'll work on adding video links as well. I know that's already published, so we can drop those in. So we'll have a nice little archive here. And then we'll have a different way to post like bulletins. So like for today, for example, we have the current environment variables that you'll need to run the template locally. We'll look at that a little deeper in a moment. Some links. We can have some agenda items here. But then this is just kind of like a landing page. And then we have a deeper live coding section where we have that archive I just showed you. And we can have a running agenda page right here. So today, my main goal is to say, hey, see who shows up. But for today's agenda, I think we got this from everybody. And hey, Harsha, by the way, I was just jumping over here to say hello.
Hey.
Hey. You know about the GitHub team, so we'll share that one if other people show up. We have a new repo that we can all look at together. It's this template right here. And then the way we can, as people start to pull this thing down, play around with it, if you discover anything, you can add those as issues directly to this Git repo. And then as we start to jump in, and if people want to start contributing in one way or another, this will be our initial source of truth, and this will be where we plan for those kind of things. So the other thing on this page is I wanted to have a way to share in real time some things that we are working on right now. And so what we're working on right now is this T3 app template, and it's not done. Only the course interactions are implemented so far. We'll be pulling in the project integrations over the next few days. And it's not even fully tested. So we have initial implementation of a bunch of transactions. We have some database functionality. We'll look at all of that live in just a moment. But I'm not even certain that our documentation has the right transaction costs estimated. There's a list here. We have 5 of these have initial verification, but this is just real-time work that's happening right now. And I figured rather than keep it to myself, it's easy to share. And one of the reasons it's easy to share is because we have these AI coding tools that help us write documentations and remember how to build a markdown table very quickly. So now that I don't have to spend time worrying about syntax, it's easy to throw these things together. And what we'll see as we look into the code base a little bit is that there's a lot of documents. We can call these, I think these might qualify. It's a Spark form. Okay, so one thing is right there. Another thing, and we looked at this briefly in the morning session, we can look at it again. We have sources of truth. We have the Cardano blockchain as the source of truth for Andamio data. And then we have a database that supports that information with, you could call it metadata. For example, the name of a course. We store that in the database, and we store a policy ID associated with that course on the blockchain. And there might be cases, especially as we start to build independent applications on top of Andamio, where the database you are working with or the one you are building doesn't have all of the database assets that are represented on chain. So this is a pretty interesting problem to solve. And I want to show you just a few examples of this today. And going down through the list, here's some other items that we might touch in the future. But the key thing to know here is that this document is going to be updated frequently because it's meant to be kind of the messy workbench space where all this different stuff is happening. Any questions about that? Hey, Sebastian. All right, so we got some documentation. We have a getting started guide that points us to this Andamio T3 app repo. And in that getting started guide, we have some environment variables. Now, this is the raw current state of our work in this template. In the long run, you're not going to need 3 different API routes to get Andamio data. Right now, we're building the Andamio API, and our goal is to launch it, like it says here in the welcome message, in January. Okay. For now, because we're testing the subsystems of the API, we have a different URL for each. So this one is connected to the Andamio database. This is where off-chain content like lessons and task descriptions are stored. We have this Andamio Scan API, which is the brand new indexer we're using to really make anything built on Andamio a lot more performant. And then we have the updated version 2 of the transaction API, where each of the transaction requests has been streamlined a bit. Now, to learn a little bit more about what I'm talking about, there's a link down below for the documentation for each one. So here's the indexer as Swagger docs. Same thing for the transaction API. Eventually. Okay. And for the database. All 3 of these subsystems are changing quickly, and you can expect that any one of these pages might look a little different today or tomorrow and certainly next week. The good news is, because we're also training an agent to support us to build on top of these APIs, when we follow standards like producing some Swagger schema, we can feed this back in and make updates pretty efficiently. Okay. So all of these, the documentation is really at the core of our work. This is kind of the loose technical documentation right now, and it's gradually being gathered into one spot. One thing I want to call out just here in Andamio Scan is all these red marks mean don't use this. Okay, so we have a few original transaction endpoints that are not ready yet. Don't use those yet. Any questions about that? Okay. So this is our work in progress. We're pulling from a few different APIs, but we are on the brand new version 2 of Andamio, which is just starting to roll out. The pre-prod access token policy ID, this is brand new, and not many have been minted yet. We can see a list of them right here. I can use this user all endpoint, try it out, to see that these are all of the access tokens that have been minted on the brand new version of the network. We can also see that there's a very short list of courses. We can query all of those here. Try that out. And you can see that for each course on chain, we have an ID, a course address, a course state policy ID, a list of who the teachers are. These are going to be names from that list of aliases below. And then a list of modules where the learning targets now go directly on the chain. Here's a course that Nelson made. Here's an empty one. Here's an empty one that I made, another one. Here's one I made that does have some learning targets. And that's the whole list. Now this course ID, this is a policy ID. And this represents the course NFT that's minted when a new course instance is created. It doesn't go into my wallet, but it does have specific owners listed right here. So as the holder of the access token with this name, I am currently the only person who has ownership of this course, right? And can make changes to it. We're going to come back to this.
That's not completely correct. The teachers are not the owners. Owner is only one access token holder.
Where is that specified?
I think Nelson does not query it, but it would be in the datum of that token.
Okay.
It was ID token.
Okay. So that's an example of something that if we realize we want that somewhere, we would want to make a new endpoint that gives us that info or add it to this one.
Yeah, I think it would be best to just add owner and then have that.
Yeah. And this is a perfect example. This is exactly where we are in this story. And so you'll see those changes coming. And maybe you'll have a few of your own to recommend. All right, so this is on-chain data. If I look at the off-chain data, I'm going to make the same query. Let's look at a list of all published courses. Try this one out. Run it. Okay. This is what we have in our database. Well, you can already tell this list is shorter than what we have right here. Let's see if there's any matching course IDs, 23A6BB. That's this one right here. So as you can see, that one is going to be the course that has the title Andamio 101. And the good news in this case, if I look at this module down here and the learning targets that are already on chain, I can mint an access token. I can complete an assignment to earn a credential. Yeah, that seems right. I'm happy that those are learning targets in Andamio 101. But the key thing I want to illustrate right here is that this data is all on chain, but the title of the course is not. It could be. Adrian and I were talking about this earlier today. Maybe at some point this title should go on chain. Maybe it goes in something like NFT metadata at the minting of the course NFT, but it's not implemented yet. And for now, this is how it's built. So I'm telling you this story right here just to kind of bring you into where we are right now. thinking about how we match on-chain and off-chain data and giving you this little example. Does that raise any thoughts or questions for anybody? Okay, well, we're going to look at this same problem from another angle in just a moment, right? Because one thing I can wonder is if I go up here, okay, well, I have, who we got?
Me,
Andrew. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I have a question just on what you said. I'm just a little bit delayed. So if we were to add that sort of information, does that the implications of that, because you're adding more information to a UTXO, there's a cost implication?
Without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, and especially because we recognize, we've talked to a few potential clients who, when they think about the number of transactions they want to run, those cost implications really matter, right, over many transactions. And so do we want to add additional metadata to a transaction? That does add some cost. So you can see right here that my access token has two other courses besides 23A6. I've got 6839 and 6F4D. Let's see. I see 6839 right here, but I don't see 6F4D. There's an on-chain course NFT minted. It's not yet represented in our database. Let's go look at the actual T3 app template. Okay, so your goal is to pull down this repo and run it locally. Here I have it running on localhost 3000. Then see if you're able to run it, hook up a pre-prod wallet, and see if things work. So I can connect this wallet. There is a little on localhost, there's this hydration issue. Did I leave that open? What is the issue? Let's try. That one gets a little stuck when I run it on dev, but let's see again. There we go. So I connected a wallet. It automatically generates a message for me to sign in the wallet that's now connected. And after I sign this, if I sign that successfully, a JWT will be generated and stored in my browser. And one of the pieces of info in that JWT is the name of my access token. Okay. And so now I'm authenticated into it'll be the API. Right now it's just the database, the off-chain database, but it'll be related to the full API as we integrate all those things. What I want to show you first is if I go to my studio, right, where I manage the courses I own, I can now see this list right here. Look, here's those two success cases, 23A6 and 6839, that they have both the on-chain entity and they have the titles in our database. Okay. And then this third one, here's this one that it says not in the database. And I have no idea what the right design patterns are here. Right? I'm just playing. But because we can play and because I can have an idea and ask Claude to do it without knowing all the syntax, I can do something like this, right? Okay, let's import. I have a course NFT. Let's add a title to that, and that'll add it to the database, right? This is my afternoon session. Can we call this Pacific session? Whatever, I can change it later, right? Now when I import this thing, cool, it gets added. Now it has a title. And if I make this same query to our database again, now all three of those course NFTs have a title associated with them. Does that raise any thoughts or questions for anybody or or would you manage this differently? Like, how does this get you thinking?
That course NFT, you can name it whatever you want in our interface. It does not. Isn't the title part of the NFT? Isn't the name of the course already? If you mint the NFT, you need to name it.
Right.
Wouldn't that name need to be the same when you import it?
Can I ask you like a specific case that might illuminate this a little bit? Think about when we start building translated versions of courses, right? And if we were to build Andamio 101 in Spanish, all of the language changes, maybe the title actually probably wouldn't have to change in this case, but you can imagine cases where we want to change the title or something, right? But the underlying learning targets, the credential it represents, could be exactly the same. In that case, isn't it nice that we can just slap a different label on something?
Okay. So the course NFT becomes like right, you're wrapping it around whatever title. Well, yeah, I guess it does. Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. Right?
Okay, so
pretty
what does
cool.
that course NFT do on chain? This API doesn't tell the whole story, but it tells an important part of it, right? I have this course represented by a policy ID. It has some people who can check student assignments, right? Me as a teacher, this means that if a student commits to an assignment, I can approve that commitment and that student earns a credential. Okay, so there's a course, there's some people who have this attestation role, and then there's a list of modules, right? And the modules, the key thing about each module is that it defines with precise statements what it represents, right? If you complete this module, if you earn this credential, what that credential says is that you're somebody who can mint an access token and who can complete an assignment. This is the essential bit that goes on chain.
Yeah, funny not to think about these things in terms of like their name, but their actual content. Makes sense. So you would import this in any, let's say, Andamio instance or whatever. You would call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, the SLTs, the modules, and the SLTs are going to be the same everywhere you import it. You can call it ABC and 1, 2, 3, but it teaches you the same thing anyways. It's gonna include those same SLTs.
It's going to represent that you know these things, right? And now
Yeah.
I don't know, into the future, will teams want to write learning targets in languages other than English? I hope so, right? And so one thing we'll figure out is when should these be translated and when is kind of whatever language they were originally written in, like that root credential, what really matters. Does that make sense? Right, like, do I want to earn the one where they're written in English, no matter how I learned that stuff, because this is the one that opens up projects?
AI translation is good enough now. I don't think language really matters much anymore.
We're almost like we're using English as the interface language for AI. So that's,
Yeah,
you put that root there.
if there is some UTC equivalent of language, we
Right.
could just.
I would disagree with Nori because you cannot have a call with someone who doesn't speak your language
Yet.
yet.
Yet, yeah, give it a month.
Sorry, I'm living a few years in the future.
So some unanswered questions there. But so we have this is the root that goes on chain. And by the way, this assignment ID right here, this is a hash of these SLT strings. It's also the token name of the module token that gets minted. But whoa, how does all that work? Okay, well, let's go to the other documentation that we have spent a little less time with so far. These are the transactions that currently exist in the template. It's not the full set. These are mostly, we have mint access token here and a bunch of course related ones. But we do have a really nice new transaction called modules manage. And this allows a teacher in a course to create new modules, to update existing ones, and to remove them, to burn a given module. We don't want to issue that credential anymore. We burn that module token. This represents actually a really big improvement over what we had in Andamio v1, where modules had to be minted and burned individually. Okay. And now we have the ability just to manage it all in these individual transactions. Pretty cool. One of the other sections in this documentation is about the coming updates, and we're just playing around with some of the new stuff. And that's an example right here, batch module management. And we'll keep playing with this documentation as we go. Any questions about this transaction before we go look at it in the UX? And actually, before I jump in there, one thing we're going to update in the docs, but it's not here yet, is that this wallet data is optional. And the reason it can be optional is if you have an alias, we can just look for which address is currently holding that access token and infer this from there, which makes this endpoint, for example, even easier to use. And this is one of the more extensive ones. But for all of these transactions, we're really trying to minimize what the developer needs, right? If you want to implement access token minting in an app, there it is. There's the whole body of the post request. It returns unsigned CBOR that then the connected wallet will sign, and they keep going with the app. Now they have an access token. Now we'll see all of the examples of that. And that's why I want to jump in over here and start thinking about how do I support people to get to these transactions where they can actually make a meaningful on-chain record of learning and contribution. And two, how do I manage the side effects of those transactions? Because as we already saw, I might have a policy ID on the blockchain, but a course title in a database, right? And there's other cases that are similar to this. We can look at one right here. So I'm going to work on this course. This course has a draft in the database of a module. And we could see this via the APIs as well. But I'm going to stay in the app for now and let you explore if you want to go deeper into where this data is coming from. And if I open this module up, I'll see that it doesn't have much yet. There's no learning targets. There's no content. There's nothing I can even do on chain, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, let me go back up. I'm still learning this navigation. I haven't played with this yet. I don't think I've shared that part. We've let an agent build greater than 90% of this app, we're doing an exercise in writing specs and schema files that it can build from. So sometimes I'm using this thing for the first time as we just start to play with it. We're going to have to get hands-on at some point with some of the details, but it's not bad for a first pass. Here we go. So look, I'm back in the same course. I'm in the Andamio 101 course. I can see in the URL for this course up here, the policy ID. Remember this 23A6BB. We already saw that in the API response. And this has a database entity called Andamio 101. And that database entity has a module with a title, but nothing else associated with it yet. However, on chain, we saw this already in the API. On chain, this course has a module with these learning targets. They're just not in the database yet. But I can see them right here because I have this query, right? So just using this query to pull in this data, showing it and saying, okay, well, just like I can have a course without a title, I can have a module on chain that's not yet registered in our database. Any clarifying questions here before we keep going?
And you work the other direction where you have stuff in the database, but not on chain yet. And just depends on how you're approaching the creation of the module.
Exact bingo, right? So in the current Andamio platform on V1, users build the course module first, and when they're ready, they mint a module token. And that's going to be the happy case. Well, I shouldn't say happy. That's just one story here, right? I have this thing in the database. I can add another module, right? There's the button. I can add learning targets and content from whatever interface we design right here. And then when I'm ready, I can publish it. I can mint that module token. Okay. But will it always be that way? And as we start to invite people to build new apps on these APIs, sure, some number of them will use our database to store course content. But I kind of ideally, right, we hope that some people also spin up their own storage solutions, store course content, local state content in some other way.
Like IPFS.
For example, right? How do I reconstitute that data? Or how do I know when it's reconstitutable? Maybe it's meant to be private and I'm only supposed to read the learning targets. So there's a whole bunch of questions that we start to open up. If anybody can build on this, we all have to share the on-chain part, but we don't have to share the off-chain stuff. I don't know how to get back to the course page. This doesn't have a link yet. Okay, so to this question again, as you can see, oh, I'm in the public view right now, right? So I can't manage modules from the public view. I want to be in the studio. I think that's why I got lost. Here we are. And I haven't tested this yet. I asked Claude to build this based on what we understood so far. So let's see if this works. I have no idea. Import this on-chain module. It was created by an access token holder, James. That's coming from on-chain. We have a module hash that's already been computed. It's the name of the module token. There's 2 learning targets printed on-chain. There they are. And it gives me a chance. Okay, I can add a module code and a title here. What if I try to use one that's already been used? I'm assuming that's... Oh, but I can't see the save button. Okay, we got to fix that. All right, so that's not scrollable. Let's see if it works. Good. All right, that breaks, so we need a good boundary for that. And it will be nice to associate a module that's already created, but that's not required.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Could you, in theory, import any module, or do you have to be its creator or owner? Like, could you create your own course around someone else's SLTs?
Okay, excellent. So I love this question. Okay, so nothing is stopping anyone from reading learning targets from the blockchain, right? So if I know a course policy ID, I can see the list of modules. I can see the hashes and lists of SLTs for each module. I might not know the name of the course. I might not know the titles of the modules, but yeah, nothing can stop me from copying this part.
And referring to that module?
Now the referring part, that's where the magic happens, right? Like what do you envision when you have somebody referring to it?
Like, I don't think they did a good job with that assignment. I can do a better one.
Mhm.
Or something like, I don't know. Or you want to augment it with additional newer information because they're not updating it for the latest stuff.
So Adrian, how would you handle that case? Because yes, I could teach people better these things, but I can't become the issuer of precisely this credential in this course.
Yes, that's correct, and that's also the point of it. So you can think of the course ID as the credential issuance institute or entity, and you don't want to become, or it should not be possible that someone else can issue credentials for you. So if they do a bad job, you can do exactly the same, but you are a different credential issuing entity.
I could steal this. I could actually have the same module token name, but in a different course NFT.
Exactly.
So you'd have a Frankendential.
Whoa, that's going to be cool. What I mean, if there's common hashes and they're competing, geez, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that implication yet with those names. Wow.
And could it help you avoid like duplicating work? Because potentially the same component could be useful in different course streams that add up to different, end NFTs, but would have similar components in them.
Ideally, right? So hopefully we have people dividing the work up in a way that's effective and less redundant. But exactly, that's one of the things I'm most excited to see is how somebody creates a basket of these modules. Hey, to join my team, you need this module from this course and that module from that course. And if you have the right basket, come on in, we need you here. And Adrian, are we blocking? There's nothing on chain blocking somebody from claiming a credential as a prerequisite.
No, there's nothing on chain.
We can build up services around that. And I think there's really interesting tokenomics potentially to explore there.
So you could bundle and say like, oh, we have a great S3 onboarding course. That's part of the thing you need, but not all of it.
Every time either somebody uses that as a prereq, or it could just be on success. Hey, a student student uses their credential from Odin to join this project, is there a way for Odin to get a share of that reward?
So I think the easiest way to implement that would be that you have paid courses. So you have to pay something to do that module. And because a lot of other people used that model as prerequisite for the projects, yeah, it would also show the value of the model. And then you can have a higher course fee.
Would that be a unique local state?
What exactly do you mean?
I mean, that would be a slightly different local state validator than Course V2, right?
Yeah, but we could use the exact same models. So we only have to change the course state policy ID.
Oh, cool. So it's, I mean, it's almost like it wraps the Course V2 functionality.
So then we could also have it like that course state policy ID is a list of policies, and you can have different ones in one course ID.
Right.
So you could have model 100 is free, but model 200 you have to pay 5 ADA, otherwise you cannot mint.
First taste is free.
I haven't even touched this yet, the prerequisites by module. And so here it is in the response, but you can also see in the manage modules transaction, when I mint a new module, I can have a prerequisite for it. And so I'm assuming, Adrian, like the basic case here means, hey, you got to do module 100 to do 101. You got to do 101 to do 102, for example.
Yes, exactly.
But this could also be across courses, right?
No, that cannot be across courses.
Oh, because it is just the hash of the SLTs. Okay. Okay, so this is just prerequisites in a course. Although I could have a course where one module is the prerequisite for many other modules. That's fine. That could be repeated. And where does this allowed students come from?
That is the local state policy ID, the one above.
This is the hash. This is a policy ID. Okay.
Yeah. So that is the local state policy ID we saw earlier, and that can change. For example, that would be the case if you have one module or one part of some models of the course, you have to pay 5 ADA. That would happen there.
That gives us that flexibility. Okay. Okay. Well, I want to wrap with enough time for a checkout round. We had 2 sessions without opening and closing rounds formally today. And so just to wrap up, we have the repo that looks like this. And if anybody wants to start to play, just make sure I have your Discord handle. I'll add you to the team, and then you'll have access to this. You can pull it down. You can get it running locally and just start screwing around with it. It's not complete, and it does require some environment variables. And you can find all of that right here in the Andamio documentation for this Andamio Pioneers. I'll drop a link in the chat.
And it's cloud ready.
The whole repo is it's working. Yeah, there's a lot of Claude context. This is a pretty long context file, and then it cross-references with all of these other capitalized documentation files. So it should be able to get up and running soon enough. Yeah. Environment here, just in case. I do think that's all in the example file now. I can confirm that. Oh, yeah, it's all here anyway. Good. It's going to change frequently, so just make sure that if you do start to play around, pull the latest. And yeah, we're going to keep running these sessions. So with that,